What is up guys, Darkly here aka Blackheart909, and today in this video I want to talk about 5 problems that I believe are plaguing the video games industry, and they're slowly killing games in my opinion. I also want to say that this video is meant to encourage open discussions, so whatever opinions you have, whether you agree with me or you disagree with me, I'd like to keep the comment section open and free for everyone to voice those opinions. Now we are going to be talking about some controversial stuff, but it's important to just be respectful of everybody and everyone's views and opinions. And whether you agree or disagree, voice them with a mature voice in the comments below. But first, my new intro. Okay, so first off, I want to start by talking about censorship and games media. So, if you guys know Digital Foundry, recently they've bought themselves out of their deal with IGN. And I believe IGN and companies like this push a certain narrative on smaller companies like Digital Foundry and make them make content that isn't fully expressing their original views. Now, if you've been a long time subscriber of Digital Foundry like I have, you'll notice a shift in content ever since the IGN acquisition. Seeing them talk really highly of consoles like the Nintendo Switch 2 when compared to the Steam Deck, and games like Doom, The Dark Ages, feels kind of untrue to their own spirit, if you understand where I'm coming from. Doom The Dark Ages had forced RT, didn't really perform too well, and changing the graphic settings did almost nothing to improve performance. And Digital Foundry didn't really cover this. They mostly focused on the positives of the game and tried to show it in the best possible light. And on the topic of censorship, I've seen this growing trend, particularly from moderation, where if you look at popular YouTube videos for games like Battlefield 6, Cyberpunk 2077, you're gonna see mostly comments that speak fondly of this game as a top comment. This is the case in a lot of new games. Definitely not all of them, but you will notice this trend. If you filter by new, you get to see people's real opinions, and even then it's sometimes censored as they come in. Certain words are blocked. You can't really speak negatively about most games online at this. Where it's even worse in my opinion is on Reddit. I have first-hand experience with this with the Alan Wake subreddit, where I expressed my opinions on what Saga Anderson said in a chapter in Alan Wake 2, and I just got banned for it.
Another white asshole deciding what I get to do, how I get to do it.
Now this is content from their game that I reposted and asked them about, and they just didn't like it, and I got banned a couple of times. That being said, Reddit moderation for games on their pages are extremely strict, and they handle criticism extremely poorly. And if you can't take criticism, you're only making it that much harder for yourself to improve as a game developer and as a company. One quick note about games media, and I've seen this recently on a Game Ranks video. In the 2010s, Japanese games had really bad review scores. Not all of them, but generally it was a trend to give Japanese games worse review scores. Games like God Hand and I remember a few others in the Game Ranks video, and this is a trend we're seeing again with Chinese game developers. Now, granted, some games may actually be bad and get reviewed poorly, but if you guys remember what IGN did with the Black Myth Wukong polls for Game of the Year back in the end of 2024, they pretty much just manipulated the polls to make it look like Black Myth Wukong received far lower votes. And I remember there was like a change of 50,000 votes, and I saw this happen live in 1 or 2 minutes. This kind of stuff can really affect game sales. Fortunately for Black Myth Wukong, however, it didn't really have too much of an impact, but these kind of manipulative tactics are really harmful to the games industry as a whole, just because of politics and not liking a certain country. Okay, number 2, and this is going to be a big one. This is DEI-based changes to existing franchises. Now, I do believe DEI has a place where it belongs, but when they introduce changes to existing franchises in games like Alan Wake, in games like the new Spider-Man 2, in games like Battlefield, which has been a long-running series, it's usually done very distastefully, and it actually hurts the franchise more than it helps it. In brand new franchises created under the DEI name, it's actually done fairly well, but in games like Battlefield 6 and Battlefield 5, where you have a disproportionate number of women running around in wars that have historically happened or are projected to happen, or like a fantasy war that's going to happen in the future, for a series that's long been rooted in realism, is immersion breaking. Think about it this way. From Battlefield 1942 to Battlefield 3, or even Battlefield 4, there were no women running around in the battlefield. All of a sudden in Battlefield 5 there's a major political shift which suddenly introduces women in historical wars that they didn't really take part in. Now I'm sure there's women who actually made an impact on these wars, and I don't want to take away any credit from them, but to see 60% or 70% of a force being represented by women, which is factually incorrect in a game that tries to be historically relevant or even pay some respects to history, is very immersion breaking for me, and it's a change that I didn't really like too much in the franchise. Now I saw a comment recently about somebody saying nobody complains about women in games like Halo. Well, Halo has never posed itself to be a game which is set in any sort of reality. It's always been a fictional universe, completely disconnected from Earth as far as I know, and I think it can work in this way. I have nothing against women. I have issues with people changing the tone of a game that's already been established in a way that misrepresents its core values. Next up, and this is more evident in the PC gaming space, but this is GPU specific optimizations and vendor lock-in. So even in the console space, this manifests itself as console exclusivity or feature exclusivity, but in the PC space it's a little bit more toxic, and I've recently noticed this with games like Alan Wake 2 and Doom Dark Ages. I'll speak mostly about Doom Dark Ages here, but it's not really limited to Nvidia. AMD does this as well, where they lock out certain games from having features like DLSS. Starfield comes to mind. But Doom the Dark Ages was a game that I believe Nvidia had a huge hand in the development of, in the sense that they made it a game that forces RT, where previous entries in the new Doom franchise had pre-baked lighting. And I believe that pre-baked lighting allowed this game to perform and run really well, and on top of that you could have optional ray tracing. But changing it to only have ray tracing basically forced people to buy Nvidia cards to enjoy this game fully. Now it's no secret that Nvidia cards are better at ray tracing than AMD cards, and they also bundled Doom for free with 50 series graphics cards, using an existing franchise like Doom to promote the sale of Nvidia cards. Since then, they've launched the path tracing update, which is great and all, but I believe that if you started off with a pre-baked lighting game, then added ray tracing, and then added path tracing as optional effects, it would make for a far more accessible game to more people. And I also believe in this case, ray tracing was done as a time-saving measure, which doesn't always mean it's going to be a good product. I believe Doom the Dark Ages is a 7 out of 10 game at best, because to me it feels like the lowest effort Doom game in the recent series. Next up, and this is something I think more people would agree with me on, and it's the use of UE5 instead of proprietary game engines. And the game that comes to mind for this is Stalker 2. Now granted, they did have issues in Ukraine during this war that has been ongoing for a really long time now, but I still believe that using UE5 actually hurt Stalker 2's reputation as a game, rather than having a proprietary game engine. And I see more and more games shifting to UE5, which is okay if you optimize your game for Unreal Engine 5, but in most cases it doesn't really happen. Another good example of this is Wu Chang Fallen Feathers. The game released super unoptimized and it ran really poorly, and if devs actually spent more time in fine-tuning their game and making it run the way it's meant to be running, it would not be such a bad thing. I feel like UE5, at least in its current state, has made more game developers lazy and rely on an engine that they don't fully understand to make games that generally look good but don't always hold up gameplay and performance wise. And finally, we have turning everything into a live service game and gacha games. Well, gacha games, to be fair, are not as bad. Their monetization structure may be a little bit predatory, but turning games into live service games really does these games disservices. The game that comes to mind for me is Marvel's Avengers. I believe it was called Marvel's Avengers. This game had so much potential, but they kind of ruined it by turning it into a live service game instead of a single player story focused game. Anthem is another such game that had so much potential but was ruined because of corporate greed and the desire to just make money off of a ever-growing game. The problem I have personally with live service games is you need to invest so much time to enjoy this game that after I play for a few hours I end up just putting the game down and almost never coming back. It's not like there's only one live service game, there's so many live service games to choose from, and it's a pretty big commitment to make to just one game. Anyway guys, that was my list of the 5 problems I think that is currently plaguing the games industry. What do you guys think? Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Comment down below and try to keep this an open and civil discussion. It's important to be respectful of everyone else, whether or not you agree with their opinions. This is not an attack on any one particular group. It's a discussion for learning. Thank you guys for watching. Dark Ruler, aka Blackheart909, signing off.